The presidential palace in Ouagadougou stood silent under the cover of darkness as Captain Ibrahim Traoré reviewed the security reports that had been troubling him for weeks. Strange patterns had emerged in the daily briefings. Guards arriving late without explanation. Communications equipment malfunctioning at critical moments. Access cards being used during off-duty hours. These incidents, seemingly minor on their own, painted a disturbing picture when viewed together. Ibrahim had learned to trust his instincts during his years in the military, and those instincts were screaming danger. Someone within his inner circle was feeding information to hostile forces. The question was not whether there was a spy among his security detail, but how many there were and how deep the infiltration went. Colonel Sankara, his head of presidential security, knocked on the office door at precisely midnight. This had become their routine since the suspicious activities began. Late-night meetings where they could speak freely, away from the ears and eyes that might be watching during daylight hours. Ibrahim gestured for Sankara to sit. The colonel placed a thick folder on the desk between them. His face was grim as he opened it to reveal photographs, documents, and surveillance logs. "The pattern is becoming clearer," Sankara said in a low voice. "We have identified at least 3 individuals within the security apparatus who have been making unauthorized contact with external parties. But what we discovered tonight changes everything." Ibrahim leaned forward as Sankara pulled out a series of photographs taken with long-range surveillance equipment. The images showed familiar faces meeting with unknown individuals in secluded locations around the city. What made Ibrahim's blood run cold was recognizing 2 of his most trusted bodyguards among those photographed. Sergeant Ouedraogo and Lieutenant Compaoré, Ibrahim said, naming the men who had been protecting him for over a year. "When were these taken?" 3 nights ago. Our counterintelligence team has been tracking suspicious movement patterns using GPS data from official vehicles. These 2 have been making regular trips to locations that are not on any official schedule. We followed them and documented these meetings. Sankara turned the page to reveal transcripts of intercepted communications. The technical details meant little to Ibrahim, but the implications were clear. His personal protection detail had been compromised. Information about his daily schedule, his travel plans, even his personal habits were being systematized and transmitted to unknown recipients. "How long has this been going on?" Ibrahim asked. "Based on the communication patterns we can trace, at least 6 months. Possibly longer. They have been very careful, using multiple communication channels and varying their methods. This suggests professional training and coordination from experienced intelligence operatives." Ibrahim stood and walked to the window overlooking the capital city. The streets were quiet, but he knew that somewhere in those shadows, plans were being made against him. The weight of leadership had always been heavy, but this betrayal by those sworn to protect him felt like a knife twisting in his chest. "What about the others? How many are involved?" Sankara consulted his notes. "We have confirmed 3 active participants within the presidential security detail. However, our analysis suggests the network extends beyond the palace. There are connections to individuals in the military intelligence service, the communications department, and possibly the foreign ministry." The scope of the infiltration was staggering. Ibrahim realized that for months, possibly years, his every move had been monitored and reported. His enemies knew where he would be before he arrived, what he would say before he spoke, and who he would meet before the appointments were made. "There's more," Sankara continued. "We intercepted a communication that suggests an operation is planned for tomorrow evening. You are scheduled to attend the memorial service for fallen soldiers at the military cemetery. The communication referenced final phase and completion of assignment in connection with that event. Ibrahim felt a chill run down his spine. The memorial service was deeply important to him personally. It honored the men and women who had died defending Burkina Faso from terrorist threats and foreign interference. The thought that this solemn occasion would be used as cover for an assassination attempt filled him with rage. "Cancel the service," he said immediately. "Sir, with respect, that might not be the best approach. If we cancel suddenly, it will alert the spy network that we are aware of their activities. They will scatter, destroy evidence, and establish new operational procedures. We will lose our chance to expose the full extent of their network." Ibrahim considered this carefully. Sankara was right from a strategic perspective, but the personal risk was enormous. However, as a military officer, Ibrahim understood that sometimes the greatest victories required accepting the greatest risks. "What do you propose?" Sankara spread out a detailed floor plan of the cemetery and surrounding area. "We use this opportunity to spring our own trap. We proceed with the memorial service as scheduled, but we control every aspect of the security arrangements. We feed false information to the suspected spies to test their reactions and trace their communication channels. Most importantly, we are ready for whatever they have planned." The plan was audacious and dangerous. They would essentially use Ibrahim as bait to draw out the spy network and expose their full operational structure. But it also provided an opportunity to send a powerful message to anyone who thought they could manipulate or control the leadership of Burkina Faso. "Walk me through the security arrangements," Ibrahim said. Over the next 2 hours, they developed a comprehensive counterintelligence operation. The suspected spies would be given false information about Ibrahim's route to the cemetery, his position during the ceremony, and his departure plans. Meanwhile, the real security arrangements would be known only to a handful of completely trusted individuals. Sankara had identified loyal officers who had been thoroughly vetted and cleared of any suspicious activities. These men would form the actual protective detail, while the suspected spies would be assigned to positions where they could be monitored and their actions documented. "We will have snipers positioned at 3 different locations with clear lines of sight to the ceremony area," Sankara explained. "Counter-surveillance teams will be monitoring all communication channels. Electronic warfare specialists will be ready to jam any remote detonation signals. And we will have rapid response teams positioned to neutralize any threat that materializes." As dawn approached, Ibrahim felt a mixture of anticipation and determination. The coming day would either expose the spy network and neutralize a serious threat to national security, or it would be his last day alive. Either way, the uncertainty and paranoia that had plagued him for months would finally come to an end. The memorial service was scheduled to begin at sunset, a fitting time to honor those who had given their lives in service to their country. Ibrahim spent the day in careful preparation, reviewing intelligence reports and coordinating with the security teams. He also took time to write personal letters to his family and closest advisors, just in case the operation did not go according to plan. Meanwhile, Sankara and his team were implementing their counterintelligence measures. The suspected spies were given their false briefings and assigned their monitored positions. Electronic surveillance equipment was activated to track all communications in and around the cemetery. The loyal security teams took their positions and began their vigilant watch. As the afternoon progressed, the intelligence teams began picking up increased communication activity among the suspected individuals. The intercepted messages were coded and brief, but the pattern suggested that some kind of operation was indeed being coordinated for the memorial service. 1 hour before the ceremony, Sankara received a critical intelligence update. Electronic surveillance had detected the presence of unknown individuals in buildings overlooking the cemetery. Thermal imaging revealed at least 2 positions that appeared to be sniper nests, and radio frequency analysis indicated sophisticated communication equipment in use. "They're here," Sankara reported to Ibrahim. "Multiple hostile positions are active around the ceremony site. This confirms that tonight was intended to be the culmination of their operation." Ibrahim felt his heart rate increase, but his voice remained steady. "Are we ready?" "Yes, sir. All countermeasures are in place. We know where they are, but they don't know that we know. The advantage is ours." The presidential convoy departed the palace at the scheduled time, but following a completely different route than the one that had been shared with the suspected spies. Instead of the main roads, they took a circuitous path through residential neighborhoods and arrived at the cemetery from an unexpected direction. As Ibrahim stepped out of his armored vehicle, he could see the assembled crowd of military families, government officials, and veterans waiting for the ceremony to begin. The setting sun cast long shadows across the rows of white headstones, creating a somber and dignified atmosphere. But Ibrahim's trained eye also picked out the subtle signs of the security operation in progress. He spotted the positions of the loyal snipers, noticed the electronic surveillance teams disguised as maintenance workers, and identified the rapid response units positioned as honor guards. The ceremony began with the traditional military honors. Ibrahim took his position at the podium, exactly where he was supposed to be according to the real security plan, but in a completely different location than what the spies had been told to expect. As he began his remarks honoring the fallen soldiers, Ibrahim could see confusion spreading among some of the security personnel who had been given false information. They were clearly struggling to understand why he was not where they expected him to be. Meanwhile, Sankara was coordinating the counterintelligence operation from a mobile command center hidden in an unmarked van. His teams were tracking the communications and movements of the hostile forces, documenting everything for later prosecution and intelligence analysis. "Contact," came the voice of one of the counter-surveillance teams through Sankara's earpiece. "We have visual confirmation of hostile sniper attempting to acquire target. Appears confused by unexpected positioning." This was the moment of truth. The spy network was exposed and vulnerable. Their carefully planned operation was falling apart because they had been fed false information. But they were still armed and dangerous, and their desperation might make them even more unpredictable. "Hold positions," Sankara commanded. "Continue surveillance and documentation. Do not engage unless immediate threat is confirmed." Ibrahim continued his speech, speaking from the heart about the sacrifices made by Burkina Faso's military personnel. But part of his attention remained focused on the subtle hand signals and radio communications from his security teams. He knew that at any moment, the situation could escalate into open conflict. What happened next was not what anyone expected. Instead of attempting to carry out their original plan, the hostile forces began a rapid withdrawal. The electronic surveillance teams tracked their communications as they received orders to abort the operation and evacuate immediately. "They're running," Sankara reported. "All hostile positions are withdrawing. It appears their command structure has realized that the operation is compromised." This presented a critical decision point. They could allow the hostile forces to escape and preserve the intelligence value of the operation, or they could attempt to capture them and risk losing the broader network. Ibrahim made the decision quickly. "Intercept and detain. We need to know who is behind this and how extensive their network really is." The rapid response teams moved swiftly to block the withdrawal routes while the counter-surveillance teams maintained tracking on the escaping individuals. What followed was a carefully coordinated operation to capture the hostile forces without creating a public disturbance that would alarm the memorial service attendees. Within 30 minutes, 7 individuals had been detained, including the 2 snipers who had been positioned to target Ibrahim during his speech. Among those captured were 2 foreign nationals carrying sophisticated communication equipment and identification documents from multiple countries. But the most shocking discovery came when the detained individuals were brought to the mobile command center for initial questioning. One of the foreign nationals immediately requested to speak with Colonel Sankara privately, claiming to have critical information about the scope of the operation. "This is much larger than you realize," the man said in accented French. "What you have uncovered tonight is just one small part of a coordinated campaign to destabilize leadership across West Africa. There are similar operations planned in Mali, Niger, and Ghana. Your security breach was intended to be a demonstration of capabilities to other client governments." Sankara felt the implications of this revelation hit him like a physical blow. The spy network within Ibrahim's security detail was not just a threat to one leader, but part of a regional destabilization program being conducted by unknown foreign interests. The foreign operative continued. "The individuals within your security apparatus are not just spies. They are part of a recruitment and training program designed to place assets within the protective details of multiple African leaders. Your President Ibrahim was selected as the first target because of his vocal opposition to foreign interference in African affairs." This explanation suddenly made all the puzzle pieces fit together. The sophisticated nature of the infiltration, the professional training evident in their operational security, the timing of their activities in relation to major political events. This was not the work of local dissidents or even regional rival governments. This was the signature of a major intelligence operation conducted by a world power with significant resources and long-term strategic objectives. Meanwhile, Ibrahim had concluded the memorial service and was being briefed on the preliminary results of the counterintelligence operation. The capture of the hostile forces and the initial intelligence gathered from their interrogation confirmed his worst fears about the scope of the threat facing not just Burkina Faso, but the entire region. "We need to inform our allies immediately," Ibrahim decided. "If similar operations are planned against other African leaders, they need to know what we have learned tonight." But even as plans were being made to share this critical intelligence, new complications were emerging. The detained foreign nationals were claiming diplomatic immunity and demanding contact with their respective embassies. Their sophisticated communication equipment had been transmitting location data right up until the moment of their capture, which meant that their handlers knew the operation had been compromised. Sankara's teams were now racing against time to extract as much intelligence as possible before legal and diplomatic pressure forced them to release the foreign operatives. Meanwhile, the 3 compromised members of Ibrahim's security detail were being held in separate facilities to prevent them from coordinating their stories or communicating with their handlers. The interrogation of Sergeant Ouedraogo revealed the most disturbing details about how the spy network had been established and operated. He had been approached more than 2 years earlier by individuals claiming to represent a private security consulting firm. They offered him substantial payments in exchange for what they described as routine security assessments and procedural reviews. Over time, the requests became more specific and invasive. They wanted detailed information about Ibrahim's personal habits, his daily routines, his family relationships, and his private communications. The payments increased correspondingly, eventually reaching amounts that exceeded his military salary by several times. "I thought I was just providing security consulting," Ouedraogo claimed during his interrogation. "They told me this information was being used to develop better protection protocols for African leaders. I never thought it would be used to harm the president." Whether this claim of ignorance was genuine or calculated, the damage had been done. Years of detailed intelligence about Ibrahim's personal and professional life had been systematically collected and transmitted to hostile forces. The memorial service attack was likely just the culmination of a much longer campaign of surveillance and target preparation. Lieutenant Compaoré's story was slightly different but equally troubling. He had been recruited through a different approach, involving compromising photographs and blackmail rather than financial incentives. The foreign operatives had gathered evidence of his extramarital affairs and threatened to expose them unless he cooperated with their intelligence collection requirements. "They said it would just be temporary," Compaoré explained. "Just a few months of reporting, and then they would leave me alone." But it never stopped. The requests kept coming, and the threats kept getting worse. The third compromised individual, a communications technician named Traoré, had been recruited through what he believed was a legitimate job opportunity with an international telecommunications company. He had been providing access to secure communication channels and encryption keys, not realizing that this information was being used to monitor and intercept sensitive government communications. As the full scope of the infiltration became clear, Ibrahim realized that the threat to African leadership was even more serious than initially understood. This was not just about assassination attempts or political destabilization. This was about creating a comprehensive surveillance and control system that could be used to manipulate and influence African governments for years to come. The foreign operatives had established recruitment networks, communication systems, and operational procedures that could be replicated across multiple countries. They had demonstrated the ability to penetrate the most sensitive security arrangements and extract detailed intelligence about political leaders and their decision-making processes. But they had also made a critical mistake. By attempting to execute their plan against Ibrahim, they had exposed their methods and capabilities to someone who was prepared to fight back. The intelligence gathered during the counter-operation would now be shared with security services across West Africa, potentially disrupting similar operations before they could be completed. As dawn broke over Ouagadougou, Ibrahim stood in his office reviewing the preliminary intelligence reports from the night's operation. The immediate threat had been neutralized, but the broader implications were staggering. The discovery of the regional destabilization program meant that the sovereignty and independence of multiple African nations were under attack by sophisticated foreign intelligence operations. The captured foreign operatives would be held for as long as legally possible while intelligence analysts extracted every detail about their network, their training, their communication methods, and their operational objectives. The compromised Burkinabe security personnel would face military justice for their betrayal of their oath and their country. But perhaps most importantly, the successful exposure of the spy network sent a clear message to any foreign power that thought African leaders could be easily manipulated or eliminated. Ibrahim had demonstrated that vigilance, professional security practices, and the courage to take calculated risks could defeat even the most sophisticated intelligence operations. The memorial service for fallen soldiers had indeed become a moment of honor and remembrance, but not in the way originally planned. Instead of honoring those who had died in past conflicts, it had become the site where living soldiers had protected their country from a new kind of warfare. The battle for African independence was continuing, but now it was being fought in the shadows with intelligence and counterintelligence rather than conventional weapons. Ibrahim knew that this victory was just the beginning of a longer struggle. The foreign powers behind the destabilization program would adapt their methods and try again. But they would now face an enemy who understood their capabilities and was prepared to defend against them. As he prepared to brief the cabinet and coordinate with allied governments, Ibrahim felt a renewed sense of purpose. The spy network had been neutralized, but the work of building truly independent and secure African institutions was just beginning. The price of freedom, as always, was eternal vigilance. Meanwhile, Sankara was coordinating with intelligence services in neighboring countries to share the critical information gathered during the operation. Within hours, security alerts were being issued across West Africa as governments moved to investigate and protect against similar infiltration attempts. The network that had taken years to establish was beginning to unravel in a matter of days. The professional arrogance of the foreign operatives had led them to use similar methods and protocols across multiple countries, making it possible to identify and neutralize related threats once the pattern was understood. What had begun as a counterintelligence operation to catch spies in Ibrahim's security detail had evolved into a regional security initiative that would reshape how African governments protected themselves against foreign interference. The attempted assassination had failed, but more importantly, it had exposed a threat that was much larger than anyone had realized. As Ibrahim prepared for the international meetings and diplomatic initiatives that would follow from this discovery, he reflected on the irony of the situation. The foreign powers who had tried to eliminate him had instead given him the intelligence and evidence needed to strengthen African security cooperation and expose their own covert operations. The memorial service for fallen soldiers had become a different kind of memorial. It marked the moment when African leaders stopped being passive targets of foreign manipulation and began actively defending their sovereignty through professional intelligence and security cooperation. The spy ring in Ibrahim's presidential security had been exposed and neutralized. But the real victory was the demonstration that African leadership could not be intimidated, manipulated, or eliminated by foreign powers who underestimated their capabilities and determination. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe to FictionWire Africa. This is a fictional story created purely for entertainment.